everybody. Welcome to our third workshop. Thank you all for being here. I'm so excited to get started on this workshop. I think you all are going to enjoy our guest speaker this evening. I think gonna learn a lot. Our topic of our workshop this evening is on the topic of how do I prepare for a professional interview? So you're going into the interview, maybe you've gone to career fairs, maybe your mentors hooked you up and connected you with someone at their company. Maybe you've gotten some referrals somewhere else. Doesn't really matter. You are about to step into the interview. Maybe you've already had interviews before. This workshop is about how to think about interviews differently. We're bringing in guest speakers who are experts on this topic from around the world to give you insight and wisdom on how to make the most out of the professional interview. So this workshop is going to be about 45 minutes long with, and I encourage you to ask questions throughout the workshop. I'm going to ask you 3 questions during the workshop, which I'll have you answer. That's how you get credit for being here. You're now midway through the program so far. You should have already had your first conversation with your mentor. Hopefully you've already started setting up your second conversation with your mentor. If you have not, or you're struggling to get in touch with your mentor, please email support@ambition-in-motion.com. We need to take care of you so then you can get connected and make the most out of this program. So really, this program is all about how can you prepare for the first professional interview. Really, what you're selling your interviewer on is your ability, essentially your future potential opportunity. Essentially, you are selling them on your potential, because at the end of the day, people are not expecting you to come in and be the expert on XYZ topic. They are expecting you to be a willing learner and someone that's eager to gain knowledge and to be a better professional. If you can convey that, you will get the opportunity. But it will be competitive, especially in highly competitive industries. And I know that anybody that's in this program is more likely than not going into a career that's competitive. I mean, you would not have gotten a mentor had you not wanted to take your level, take your career, take your life to the next level. So with that said, I want to encourage you to keep your head up, keep applying, put yourself out there for more opportunities, and leverage the insight and knowledge that you're getting in these workshops to make yourself and to help you better prepare yourself for the interview. Now, before we get started into our main program, I want to ask you a quick question, and that question is, when it comes to the interview, how do you want people to feel about you? In other words, what feeling are you trying to convey about yourself when you are in an interview? Post in the comment section. I'd love to learn about that, because I think if we are more intentional about how we want other people to feel about us in the interview, our likelihood of actually having that happen increases substantially. I mean, I've talked about in past workshops, strategy, story, state, which I will talk about in a moment, but this is a really big part of the story part. Like, what is the story that you're telling yourself? Now, I think sometimes we can interpret that as psyching ourselves up, getting ourselves confident, getting ourselves pumped for why we're going to be successful. And I think that's great. But I think if we could take it to another level, that being intentional about how we want other people to perceive us. So if we want them to perceive us as confident, or if we want them to perceive us as knowledgeable, or if we want them to perceive us as eager to learn and having potential, it could be a variety of things. But what I really want you to do is I really want you to identify feelings that you want other people to feel about you when you enter their world. Because you can be intentional about that. Your likelihood of having them actually feel that is much greater. But if you don't set the intention, you have no idea how they're going to feel about you. You've got really no control over it. But if you intentionally think to yourself, I want people to think of me as confident. Okay, what am I going to do that's going to convey convey confidence? Really, it's all about whatever that feeling you want to convey. Make sure that you are taking actions and being intentional about ensuring that other people view you that way, and that you come in trying to actively think about actions that you can take that will help other people perceive you in that light. So let's start under the next part of our workshop. Now, I've talked about this in the past before, and I've talked about this in previous workshops, but one of the big things that I always love to stress is the 3 keys to success in the program. There are 3 of them. That is your strategy, that is your story, that is your state. I bring it up every single time because it is that important. And the reason why it's important is because if we are not honing our strategy, honing our story, honing our state, we are not setting ourselves up for successful. If we let someone else drive our roadmap for us, we could end up in a location that we do not want to be. But if we are intentional about our story, if we're intentional about our strategy, if we are intentional about our state, we are much more likely to get to where we would like to go. It's kind of like the law of attraction. When we put it out there, and we put it out to more people, when we're more intentional about what we want to accomplish, and we're more intentional about how we are going to convey our bodies and ourselves to other people, the likelihood that it comes back to us is much greater. So I want to talk about state. State is the most important thing. Like physically, where are you at in your life, in your world? What is going on? I don't care how stressed you are. I don't care how mad you are. I don't care how dejected you are. I don't care of anything negative going on in your world. If you can get yourself into a state conducive for being successful, especially for the interview, you will be successful. I'm a big proponent of power poses. I'm a big proponent of screaming at the top of your lungs and dancing out. In fact, I'd like to do that with you right now. So for the next 30 seconds, what I like you to do is I like you to stand up. I like you to shimmy it out. I like you to shake it out. I like you to scream at the top of your lungs. Just scream at the top of your lungs at the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Yeah! Just let it out, let it loose, let it go, because you've got nothing to lose. I don't care if it's a popularity contest. I don't care if you're in a library. I don't care if you're in a house. What do you have to lose? This is not a coolness effort here. It's about making an impact and preparing yourself physically for being successful. What is the price of success? Getting yourself into a state conducive for being successful. Maybe looking a little weird to some of your colleagues, coworkers, or peers, but what is that cost to you in the long run? Nothing. They're going to say, you know, hey, what were you doing? Why were you dancing? Why were you screaming at the top of your lungs? You say, hey, I'm getting myself in a state conducive for being successful. Maybe they've never heard about it before. Maybe they've never learned. You can educate them on this. So don't worry about how other people are perceiving you when you are going to get yourself into a state that's going to level up your game, especially when it comes to the interview. Now, you may not want to do this in the office of a business that you are about to interview in, but you could certainly do it in the bathroom, in a bathroom stall. Get yourself into a 2-minute power pose. Stand up like Superman or Superwoman, or put your arms out like as if you're a star. There's a lot of things that you can do to get yourself into a state conducive for being successful, but you should be doing something, because if you're not, you are letting the way that other people perceive you essentially come up to chance. And you don't want to chance it, especially for the opportunity of a lifetime. And you have no idea which opportunity is the opportunity of a lifetime. It may not be this job. It could be the next one. If you make a positive impression in an interview and you may not land that job, that interviewer could have really loved how you interviewed, and that person may not be at that company for forever, or they might be, and they might come up with a new job. They might reach out to you personally to have you come and interview. It's all about the relationship. It's all about how they perceive you. It's all about that impression you leave. Your state is critical. Now, what is the story you tell yourself for why you are going to be successful? This is something we kind of did earlier when I asked you, how do you want other people to feel about you in the interview? This is a great exercise to prepare yourself for a professional interview. If you are intentional about how you want other people to feel about you, you're going to put yourself into a position to succeed, because then you're much more likely to manifest that outcome. Literally, law of attraction, putting it out there. I want other people to feel XYZ about me. Confident, smart, intelligent, well prepared. I don't care what it is. Maybe it's a weakness that you have, but you like to have them perceive it as a strength. Maybe it's a strength that you have that you'd really like to amplify even as a greater strength. Doesn't matter, but set an intention of something. Because if you don't set an intention of something, it could be wild in terms of what they actually perceive of you. Now, the last key is your strategy. What are the things that you're going to do to make the most out of this interview? Are you going to come prepared with questions? Are you going to come prepared with doing background research on the company? Are you going to make an intentional, focused effort on taking notes during the conversation, so then you're asking poignant, direct questions to the interviewer that are relevant about his or her life? Are you going to do the things that you need to do to be the most successful in an interview, or are you not? So the strategies you're going to learn from our guest speaker later on in this workshop, I think you're going to really enjoy what our guest speaker has to say. But before we jump into our guest speaker, I want to talk about one final thing, and that is getting yourself into a routine that can help you prepare for an interview. One of the things that I like to do, have an accountability partner. This could be it could be anybody. But what you want to do with your accountability is you want to share with your accountability partner 3 things that you learned this week and 1 thing that you've done to get closer to that internship or job. What this does, and you might think this sounds silly, you might think this sounds crazy, it could be another student in the program, it could be a friend of yours, does not matter. But what we've learned, what we've observed is that students who land jobs and internships through this program are substantially more likely to actually land that job and internship if they told other people about their experience. One of the questions we ask at the end of the question is, on average, how many other people did you tell about your experience in the program? What we ended up learning was that when a student told 20 or more people about their experience in Ambition in Motion, their likelihood of also landing their job and internship was substantially higher than students who didn't. There's a direct correlation to you telling more people about your experience and what you're learning in this program to actually landing the outcomes you like than not. So I want to challenge you to identify an accountability partner. Share with them 3 things that you've learned this week and 1 thing that you've done to help you get closer to landing that job or internship. Now, the other big thing that I want to bring up with you is a referral program. So we are now starting to open up the applications. And one, I'd love for you to be in part of the program again. You can get a new mentor, you're going to get new content, you're going to learn from new speakers. But more importantly, I want you to encourage other students to get involved as well. We have a referral program for you, so then you are discounted to get in the program next semester. Essentially, anytime that anybody applies, we ask them, how'd you hear about us? If they write in your name, you get credit. If you don't mind being an ambassador for this program and helping encourage other students to get involved and take advantage of this, I would greatly appreciate it, because it would help us make a bigger impact on more people, which is really what our goal is. So let's jump into our workshop. I'm so excited for you to meet our guest speaker. I'm so excited to transition into this next part of the workshop. Remember to answer the 3 questions that we asked during the workshop. That's how you get credit for being here within 24 hours of the workshop going live. If you got any questions, any concerns, any issues with anything at all, please email support@ambition-in-motion.com. We will answer those questions, concerns, and issues. Thank you all for being here. I'm so excited for you to meet our guest speaker.
We are here to talk about our next workshop for the higher ed program this semester. We're here to talk about how to prepare for the interview. So you might be in the scenario, or maybe you've already got a job, maybe you've already got an internship, maybe you don't, maybe you're in the interview process. Either way, the job that you've got, if you have a job, isn't going to be the last job you have for the rest of your life. I'm assuming most people are not working at their employer right out of college for the next 30-something years. Most of them do switch. So even if you have a job, this workshop is going to be still incredibly valuable to you. And if you don't have a job, please leverage these insights and tips. We've got a great guest with us here today to talk about the topic of how to prepare for the interview. We've got Erica Gil. Erica, thanks for being here.
Thank you so much for having me, Garrett.
So Erica, if you could just maybe give a little bit of background as to who you are, what you do, just a little overview of who you are.
So I came from, currently in the role of Chief People Officer out of Good Ranchers. It's a direct-to-consumer meat subscription company. And so I do all of the hiring, I do all of the onboarding, performance management, but I also came from education, where I was a principal of an elementary school, which was responsible there, again, for hiring, recruiting, and continuing to maintain the teachers that we had there.
So what you're saying is, you know a little thing or two about what you're looking for when it comes to hiring talent.
Yes, I've spent over half of my career either recruiting, hiring, or headhunting at some point in my career.
That's awesome. So if you could, let's just kick right off into it. I think a lot of students are in a scenario where they're maybe freaking out about the resume, freaking out about their cover letter. Are there high-level tips that students can apply to at least get their resume and cover letter into a position where they feel good about it? Because don't get me wrong, I think it's really important to have a good resume and a really good cover letter. I also think you are the worst judge of your own resume and cover letter. I think people individually are the worst own assessors of their own cover letters and resume. What tips do you have for helping students craft and cater the resume and cover letter to a role and position?
So I definitely will say, I'll start off with the cover letter. With that one thing, I mean, I'm not one that really looks at the cover letter, but if I do get one and it's generic, if it's dear sir or madam, it doesn't take time to actually acknowledge who I am. Like if we've been in this conversation and I say, hey, send me your resume, and it's just very generic and it doesn't actually personalize it or personalize it to the position, and it's just very then that makes that kind of is like a little bit of a turnoff, because it makes it feel like, okay, did you do the background of actually looking at who you're sending it to, what the position is, what the company is. And then when we're talking about resumes, keep it simple. And I'm saying, as far as font, and if it's neon green, neon purple, blue, it's not gonna pop for me. It's gonna be okay, I don't think this is the right fit for the company. keep it simple with font, keep it simple with color. But also, I mean, I know I sound a little contradictory here, but make it stand out. You can do that in so many different ways. There's so many different formats out there that highlights certain parts of, if you were, if you graduated with honors, that definitely is something that stands out. If you were involved in different extracurricular, I know especially for recent graduates, you may not have the work experience that says like, I have this percent that I helped grow in my company, but guess what? You do have a lot of things you did, maybe in internship, maybe in volunteering, maybe in different aspects of what you've done so far in your experience that you can highlight. That is something that I look at when I'm looking at resumes. 17 pages, I'm not going to read through 17 pages of your resume. Have it one page where it really highlights the big milestones and markers in your work experience so far, your college experience so far, things that are going to help you stand out amongst the other applicants that are also, that I'm sifting through 20 resumes. What's going to help yours to stick out is being able to highlight, and misspellings. That's a definite, like, no, like, have someone look over it, have somebody look at formatting. If you've got different fonts, that's always something that is definitely a turnoff.
Yeah, no,
I feel like resumes are like kind of like dating. Like, you want to stand out, but you don't want to be that obnoxious kind of like too much out there. You want it to be put together, because this is my first experience with you as an applicant, is that resume or that cover letter.
photo on the resume, no photo on the resume.
Oh,
Doesn't matter.
honestly, that really doesn't matter.
I
It
would
really
say
doesn't.
I lean towards no photo on the resume just to avoid any bias or
Yeah.
whatever that could occur in the hiring process. And I love what you said about keeping it concise. I also love what you said about having a friend review it, because oh my gosh, I was a burger flipper at McDonald's. That could have been a really valuable experience to share when I was applying for this role in investment banking. It's like,
Yes.
no, it wasn't. They don't care.
Right.
Like, that's not, I mean, if that's your only work experience, maybe it shows that you've done something. But
Right.
if you've got at least a little bit of work experience, what you did a long time ago, more likely than not, isn't relevant. Now, if it is relevant, definitely include it. But look at what are the most relevant experiences you could have. I also
Yeah.
we said about including some of the extracurriculars. In fact, in one of our other workshop recordings, one of our like our guest was sharing that she ended up leveraging her major of Spanish literature in her role at a major bank, where
Yeah.
she was able to speak Spanish to clients about, whatever, Spanish speaking challenges they were going through when it comes to their bank. And
Yeah.
like, that was a not explicit, like she at the time was an analyst. So she wasn't hired to necessarily speak Spanish per se, but the fact that she had it on her resume made it very tantalizing and attractive when it came to, someone who does know how to speak Spanish versus someone who doesn't know how to speak Spanish.
I will say too, look, really make sure to read through what the job description is that you're applying for, because just like the example you just said, not tailoring your resume to fit that position, but really making sure you highlight, if they're looking for a college degree, highlight that. If they're looking for somebody who is bilingual, highlighting that, because as we're sifting through resumes, I'm looking for those key pieces that I know that I'm hiring for this position. I know what I'm looking for. So that's what I'm looking for in a resume. Um, that, I mean,
You
so it's
know,
not tailoring it, but it kind of is. I mean, because you're not going to have a different resume for every position, but just making sure that what you're applying for, your resume speaks to that.
I'm currently reading the book Unreasonable Hospitality by a guy named Will Guidara, and it makes me think about that point you made about the cover letter of just really catering it to um, whatever the job role is. And the story is, and I'll try to keep it quick because I think it's important for anybody both who's hiring and for anybody wanting to get hired. He was the front of house manager at a restaurant called 11 Madison Park. It's in New York, and he was brought in to more or less help change the culture of the restaurant. They had like these new servers who were part of this very formal high-end dining experience where they followed all these sometimes antiquated, sometimes very respectful rules. Where they had some also legacy servers who, you know, maybe did some things like had maybe a wrinkled shirt on or would lean on the table to build rapport with customers, where like high fine dining would say you never lean on the table in any circumstances or whatever.
Right.
And he came in and, you know, more or less said, okay, you know what, we want to create the best customer experience possible, which means that if we lean on the table to build rapport with the customer, that's okay because it's amplifying their experience. We also need to come in with no wrinkles on our shirts because we want to look professional in this environment. So when he would bring on new hires, one thing that he found was if he brought hires on in a one-by-one basis, they would in typically 1 to 2 months become toxic, or become toxified by the fellow colleagues that they were working with. Because if you've got some team members that are toxic here or some team members that are toxic there, like their light dims in terms of their drive to give the best customer experience possible. So what he ended up doing was hiring in batches, hiring groups of people and saying, hey, you're coming in as a class for our company and y'all are passionate about giving the customers the best possible experience possible. And if you ever face adversity, go to each other. Don't necessarily go to anybody else in the company. Go to each other for support. And what he found was that was really critical to changing the culture of the organization.
Yeah.
The reason why that's relevant to cover letters is that if you're looking at the mission of a company and you can cater your cover letter for why you were so passionate about pursuing and furthering this mission, you will show that you are a culture fit. All the skills can be taught. Most of the skills can be taught in terms of actually getting the job itself. But in terms of like culture fit, that's something that can't be taught. You either got it or you don't.
Yeah.
What do
Yeah.
you think about that?
Agree. I agree. I mean, and I think that's why cover letters kind of got a bad rap for so long, is because they're just kind of dismissed. And it's like, I'm going to create this cover letter that I'm not going to personalize to meet the needs of the company. And I'm going to make it very generic. And I think that's why it kind of became this, I'm not even going to read it now, but the ones I do see and they catch me in the first sentence, I will actually read their cover letter. So it can actually be a deterrent to you if it's just generic and
Right.
basic.
Yeah.
So I
So
agree.
let's talk about the interview itself. We're in the interview, we're getting asked questions. Is there a methodology that you follow to ensure that your answers are to the point and concise? Like, I think I definitely, I've been a part of a lot of interviews. I've hired a lot of people. I know you obviously have too. Typically when I ask a question, I'm looking for one answer. Like I don't need a long response. I do not need a diatribe. It's like, keep it short and to the point. Sometimes people ramble for forever.
Yeah.
What advice do you have to help keep it like, keep it straight and to the point, answer the question, don't answer anything else?
Right. I would say, definitely like looking at, I mean, just kind of taking a step back and looking at the actual company, doing your research on what their mission, vision, and values are, who they are as a company, speaking to that so that you can really hone your, because you're not going to know what they're going to ask. So ensuring that you've already internalized this company. Like if you've applied, then you actually want to work there and you have done the research to be able to answer that question and align it to what you know. I mean, this person who's interviewing actually works here and believes in the mission, vision, values. And so you've internalized it enough to make it a part of your answer, as well as doing your research on, I mean, now you can Google anything, Chat GPT, anything to be able to find questions that you can practice. Practice makes perfect. I mean, as perfect as you can be, but practice with someone. I can't say that enough of like, hey, getting some questions and finding somebody to be like, hey, okay, let's work through some of these questions so that you can have, if it's a finance position, having questions that you've already thought through, because the more that you internalize the questions that you could be asked, it could be asked a different way, but you've internalized enough of the question to be able to answer the big rocks of what they're asking.
Let me
Because that's
hold on a
when
second. Let
people,
me ask the students a question real quick. Sorry for interjecting. I just
yeah,
It made me think of something, because the power of leaning on your friend, both for your resume, your cover letter, your interview, is so powerful. Students, answer in the comment section, who is someone you lean on for getting advice on your resume, your interview skills, your cover letter? Post in the comment section. We'd love to learn who that is. Sorry, go ahead. Continue on.
Yeah. The more you practice with someone, the more comfortable you get with answering these questions. I think when you start to ramble is when you don't know what to say. You don't know how to answer it. So you're trying to like grasp at straws. So being as prepared as possible for that interview, knowing the position, you may not know the ins and outs of everything, but knowing foundationally what the position is, what they're going to be asking, what are some sample questions, and then doing it enough that it becomes a part of you, so that when you answer, you're answering those big rocks and you're not having to like scramble and try to find the words to answer something you really may not know.
Do you subscribe to the STAR method, like situation, task, action, result, when it comes to responses and interviews?
I don't.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I've heard the STAR method. I think it's a pretty efficient way to answer questions. Just to your point, don't ramble. But like if someone says like, "Tell me about a time that you did blah 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 blah," so like, here's the situation. Keep it brief, 1-2 sentences, super short. This is what I did. Here's my action. This was the result. I think if you can keep it short and sweet and concise, you are much more likely to get people to buy into, or really just better understand what you're asking, or get them to understand that you've got the experiences that they're looking for.
Yeah. And I think, again, like I'm going to go back to practicing that as much as possible so that that format becomes internalized, and you're not like, I think what I've seen the most is just like people coming in not being prepared. And so you get nervous and you start just like rambling. And the more prepared you are, the more confident you are, the more you practice whatever kind of method you have for answering those questions, and you feel comfortable and at ease when you're answering them in an interview. And that's like the nonverbal kind of skills that people are also picking up on when you're in an interview.
What about the questions? Like, you always get to the end of an interview and an interview may ask like, "Oh, what questions do you have for me?" I feel like anybody who says, "I don't have any, we're good," is 0% chance I'm hiring you. Zero.
Yeah.
You might as well have just not even showed up. I don't really care. Like, if you got no questions for me by the end of like a 30-minute to 60-minute interview, then you have squandered and wasted your time and that opportunity. But what are some questions that a student can ask to show that and because there's levels of questions that are fluffy questions, like, oh, I don't know, like the logistics questions, like how many hours do you expect me to work, or like what's the compensation, like, sure, those should be covered in the interview itself. But are there questions that one can ask to show that they've done their research, their homework, and that they're really engaged in the mission of what the company's doing?
I think two questions that are really really good because the interview goes both ways, right? I'm interviewing you, you're interviewing the company to see like whether this is a good fit for you, whether our mission, vision, values align with yours, if this is going to be a place you want to be. So two questions I think that are really good, that give you a good feeling of if this is the right fit for you, would be what they're looking for in this position. What are they looking for in a candidate that is highly capable in this position? What are the things that they're looking for? As well as what would people say? What would your employees say? What do you love most about your company? That's one thing that I always love when people ask, is like, what do you love about working here at XYZ company?
You know what I also love to ask is like, tell me your story. How did you get into this role? That's such a powerful question, because people, honestly, like if you think about taking a selfie with a group of people, who's the person you look at first, last, and most often? Yourself. And so if you ask someone about their story, it shows that you care about what's most important to them, which is themselves. Not that people are selfish, but people like their own story much better than like anybody else's story. And if you ask them about it, you're much more likely to endear yourself to them. I also am a big fan of, like, if you can do like if the company's a publicly traded company, or if there's
Yeah.
news articles about the company, or there's a new initiative that came out, like if you
Mhm.
could show that you did your research and say like, hey, I noticed that in the quarterly earnings report that your CEO mentioned that some of the strategic initiatives that you're working towards is A, B, and C.
Yeah.
I know obviously for this role, we're looking at doing X, Y, and Z, but will there be an opportunity to pursue A, B, and C? As I know that you mentioned in that your CEO mentioned in that press release that that is the vision for the company and the things that you're working towards moving forward. It's like, whoa, this person did their homework and shows initiative. That's like shows that you've got a strategic level of thinking. I think those are a good way of asking questions.
Yeah, I think anybody that does their research, whether it's social media, whether they're looking at, I've had so many people come in and they've looked at the data for good rant for the company that I'm at, or they've looked at if it's a social media position or a customer experience position, they've come in and they've actually called our customer experience line and they've said like, hey, these are some of the things that I've noticed. Sat on our chat with somebody from customer experience and have been able to say like, hey, it took 15 minutes. These are some of the things that I would do to, or these are some of the things that I've seen. These are some of the things I've noticed. Always sets you apart from the crowd because not everybody is going to do their research, but coming in already knowing that, people that have come in and already know our mission, vision, and values, and they're like, this is this. I totally, I mean, you don't have to be fake, but being honest and saying like, some people that are like, I love what you guys do for, whatever, XYZ.
Speaking of social media, you had some notes before the call about students, what students think about when it comes to their social media. What tips do you have on social media for preparing for an interview?
Yes, I will say the first thing anybody is going to look at is if you're on social media, and it's not to be in your business, it's not to any other reason, but to see like, hey, let me check this person out. Let me see what they have going on, what they like, what they don't like. One thing that I will say is if you can keep it private, because there are so many times I've gone on someone and it's like, oh, I hate being at work. Oh, I'm here again. Okay, that's definitely not somebody that probably would align with the values that we have at our company. So just being aware, especially during interviewing season where you're going to a lot of interviews, people are naturally going to go and see who you are. And if who you are is not aligned to their company, then that's you don't want them saying no before they've even met you. So just be aware that everything is, if you keep it public, people can see everything.
I'm thinking like, it would be hilarious if there was I don't know, a Twitter account of Jim's pranks on Dwight in The Office. If anybody watches The Office or whatever, and it's like Jim's applying for a job. They're like, so it looks like for a coworker, you put a stapler in Jello. Why'd you do
Exactly.
that?
Exactly. Exactly. Yes.
So yeah, I mean that's a silly joke, but it's
Hmm.
relevant to all of this. So I guess maybe a question I've got for students, post in the comments section, how do you manage your social media? How do you go about ensuring that everything that's put out there is professional? And if you there potentially are some things that are not professional, what can you do to kind of curate your social media to ensure that yeah, the only professional stuff that you want to be seen is seen. Post in the comment section, we'd love to learn more. So Erica, let's talk about the post-interview process. How many times, like, I don't know, I love applicants that give me a follow-up. I mean, the amount of people that don't follow up after an interview is astonishing.
That's,
And I personally will not only send an email, I'll also write a handwritten letter saying, thank you so much for your
yes.
time. Sure, it might not get there for a week after the interview, but it's going to take that company more likely than not, at least a week to consider it. If you write a handwritten letter, I mean, you're pretty much, I mean, you don't necessarily have the job, but like it shows that you really, really care. And it's such a low stakes thing. You get a stamp, you write a letter, you sign it, you appreciate them for their time, you find their mailing address, you write the hiring manager's name on it, you send it in. You already send the email too, but oh my gosh, if you really want to stand apart, the handwritten letter I think is such a good touch. But I don't know, what are other tips that you have in terms of the post interview process?
No, I mean, I will co-sign on the follow-up email or letter. I will say out of all of the interviews I've done, I've gotten maybe on one hand less than 5, but they always stand out amongst all of the rest of the interviews. It only puts that final touch onto the interview is having a nicely worded follow-up email. I mean, it's above, it goes above and beyond, and it shows that you have that follow through, and it's definitely just best practice. I wish more people did it.
It's crazy. It's the simplest, littlest thing. Go out to your grocery store, get some stamps,
Yeah,
50 cents. It's you go get a letter. Get some thank you notes. You can order them on Amazon. They're
yep,
pretty cheap. Like, just do it. It sounds so like maybe tedious or time intensive, but seriously, send it out. What you do by doing that is if you're in the top tier, you set yourself apart as definitely getting the job. But what
yep,
really the critical element is, if you're in the middle tier where you're like, maybe not going to get a call back, maybe not going to get a follow-on interview, you
right,
send that letter, you immediately put yourself in the follow-on interview stage.
yep,
Like, you
I
put
agree.
yourself into a spot to get a shot on goal, whereas you would not have gotten that shot on goal had you not done that. So it's
I
such a
agree.
low, like low time investment, low financial investment, high reward activity that if you do, you really can get a great outcome from it.
I agree. I agree.
I
Speaks
know
volume.
a lot of students are interviewing for probably multiple roles right now. How do you handle that? Let's say if you get an offer, let's say you're interviewing for 2 companies, and one of them has given you the offer, but maybe it's your second best option. The first option is taking a little bit longer in the hiring process. You're not going to start till May anyways. Let's say, we're in the fall or maybe early spring or whatever. How do you go about like handling that? Do you just accept the offer because you got it and then revoke that offer if you get the offer from the other job? Like, how do you go about handling a scenario where you get an offer and they give you a deadline for when to accept or not accept?
I definitely have had people before that have asked when, how long they have to accept it. And so I think being honest with whoever it is, not too honest, but like I wouldn't say like, hey, I'm actually waiting on somebody else, but being able to be honest and say like, um, I'm really wanting to like look at not the options that I have, but I really want to look at if this is the best fit. I want to take some time to actually think about it. I would totally respect that because it's a big decision. Like the position that you're applying for, like it's a big decision, and I want you to be really sure that you want to, go in this direction. So I think just being transparent and being honest and saying like, hey, um, this is what I just need some time. And then when it comes to like, hey, you have this deadline, like really thinking through, like, is this something you want to forego to wait for this other position? Or is this something that you're like, no, I really want this one? And being able to email that other, or contact them and just see where they're at with the process. Cause I know it can get really hard when you've got all of these different offers and you've been doing all these interviews. Um, like the one thing I will say, and I know this isn't really, this is apart from answering your question, but find the position that it's not just, oh, I'm going to be making all of this money, but something that you want to go to every day and something you're going to love doing because yes, compensation is so important and it's so, you want to be compensated for the work you're doing, but you also are going to be there 8 hours a day or doing this work, finding the company that you actually want to be at. Like you are driving in the car going there, or you're logging on and it's something that you'll actually want to spend your time doing, because
I think that's a
that's
really good point. I think, yeah, it's so easy to become enamored with the money and not with the actual like work itself and the culture of the company. I will say I've got, so I interviewed interviewee for, this workshop in years past, and he had a different take on the whole offer situation. I'm going to share it. I think it's fascinating. I don't actually know if I agree with it, but I want to share it just to share the other side of the coin.
Yeah.
When it comes to companies and their willingness to lay you off, they're not giving you that kind of they're not giving you a whole lot of notice. They're just making that decision on your behalf, and you don't really have a choice in the matter of it. Their propensity to lay you off and be willy-nilly about it, he said, you know what, you should accept the offer once you get it. And if you get another offer, you rescind it just like they would lay you off if they determine they can't hire you anymore. I know that's an unpopular and a different opinion. It's just I'm putting it out there because I think it's interesting. I also think the other element of it is if I'm a hiring manager and I make an offer and someone says, "Hey, can like you hang out for a little bit while I weigh my options?" Nothing sours my whole experience of you worse than that. Like it would be like you brought up the dating example earlier. It's like
Right.
if you're in a kind of loose but not official relationship with someone, you say, "Hey,
Right.
can we potentially be exclusive?" And they say, "Hey, I'm still weighing my options. Can I get back to you in a couple weeks on that decision?"
Yeah.
Nothing says, yeah, this person's not really into this whole thing like I thought, like I am into this whole thing. So, there's an element of being just excited and elated to take an offer. And then if you
Yeah.
have to pull out, you pull out. But I don't know. It's a different perspective. It's a different opinion. Obviously, as a hiring manager, I would suck to, get someone to accept the offer and then all of a sudden rescind it. But, it definitely doesn't start off great if like, you're like, "Hey, let me think about it." And they're like, "I guess I'll take this offer." And you're like, "Great. I guess I'm hiring you." You know?
Yeah. Yeah, and I get that. And I totally understand. I think if somebody were to accept the position and then in a week they got a better position and they let me know, like I would be I would want but I think I'm a little different. So I would much rather you be somewhere that you're happy and that if our company was not it, then yeah, it kind of sucks for me because now I have to get back but that's my role. Like that's what I do. So I would much rather the person be in the position they want to be in and with the company they want to be in than, so I think, but I may be the one that's, it's
No.
not common.
Yeah, I think it's just, hey, I like to just bring up different perspectives,
Yeah.
both sides of the coin to share. Another interesting thing, you brought up compensation, you brought up company culture before. One past interviewee that we've had on this topic, she brought up an interesting point. She was at a company where she knew she was not the highest paying opportunity out there in existence. And she had a candidate that she loved. She was like, "Man, he's the best. He'd be such a good fit at this company. I think he'd be amazing." And he did something that really impressed her. He came to her and said, "Hey, Tina, I've really enjoyed our interactions together. This has been great. Here's an offer that I got from this competitor. Can you help me just do a SWOT analysis, a pros cons list of like how we can rationalize this? Because their offer is coming at almost double the amount of what you're paying. Like, how can we like weigh this out? Like, I want to weigh it out with you together." And she did it with him. And she was like, "I thought that was one of the most mature things any applicant has ever done." Because at the end of the day, we determined together that my offer could not eclipse his offer. However, I said, she was like, we have different like pay scales and pay bands, and I can only pay this much for this type of role. She said, "However, the next level, my pay band is actually pretty competitive. And come 6 months from now, after you're in this role, as you build that experience, you'll be eligible for this type of elevated position. And I think our rapport is amazing, and I'd love to stay in touch." She ended up hiring that guy 8 months later in the elevated position. Why? Because he came to her and was transparent about his situation. And I don't know. I think there's a lot of power of just working with the hiring manager, especially after you get an offer and you got two offers that you're weighing. They say, "Hey, here's the other offer. Can we just create a pros cons list together? I'd just love to balance this and weigh this with you." And even if you chose not to go with that person, they feel appreciative that you gave them the chance to potentially earn their employment with you.
I would 1000% respect anybody that did that came with that kind of thought that shows so much about the person. Um being able to do like doing something like that. I would totally be down, like respect that.
Yeah.
And the conversation that would come from that is so beneficial and helpful on both sides. Because not only does it help both of us to be able to say like, yeah, is this somebody that I would want working for the company? Is this a company that I feel like is where I want to be? I think it's mutually helpful for both.
I love it. So students, I got one last question for you. Post in the comment section. What would you do if you were posed with a scenario where you had multiple offers at the same time? How would you handle it? Post in the comment section. I'd love to learn more. So Erica, this has been a great workshop. Are there any final tips or suggestions or insights that you'd like to share with our students before we sign off?
I said it already, but I'm gonna say it again, like really research the company, really look at who they are, what they stand for, and be true to yourself. This is gonna be a place that you're gonna be at for 8 hours of your day. So most days, a lot of times, and especially when you're building your career, sometimes you're there more than when you're with your family. You want it to be a company that you believe in, that you want to be at, and it's gonna come through in your interview and in that face-to-face when you do meet them, your passion and that you have done the work to actually like research. It goes so far by being able to do that and send the follow-up. Always send the follow-up because that really does matter more than the cover letter, which I know the cover letter is important, but send that follow-up. You'll stand out amongst the other applicants.
Amazing. Well, Erica, this has been a fantastic workshop. Thank you for being here. Thanks for your time. Students, thank you all for your time. I look forward to seeing you all at our next workshop. See you, everybody.